Looking for magic cards? At flipsidegaming.com you can now use the promo code LVD to get a 10% discount on orders over $10 while supporting the channel at the same time. Hello and welcome to another episode of Friendly Friday, a weekly series where we take a look at budget, standard or modern decks, and this week we're taking a look at Monoblack Aggro in standard, a very aggressive deck running lots of 1-drops that can attack for 2 every turn, and of course the goal is to kill the opponent before they get to do powerful things and before they get to stabilize. So let's take a look at the entire list, starting out with our 1-drop creatures, where we have a total of 16 1-drops that can essentially attack for 2. So we've got 4 copies of Dread Wanderer, 1 mana 2/1 that enters the battlefield tapped, and for 3 mana we can return them from the graveyard into play if we have 1 or fewer cards in hand. Then we have 4 copies of Grasping Scoundrel that gets +1/+0 as long as it's attacking, so attacks as a 2/1. We've got 4 copies of Night Market Lookout, which is a 1/1 that drains the opponent for 1 whenever he becomes tapped. So when he attacks, of course, he becomes tapped, and then we gain 1 life and the opponent loses 1 life. Also works very well with vehicles, since by crewing a vehicle, we can also tap the Lookout without having to attack with it. And our final 1-drop creature is Vicious Conquistador, a 1 mana 1/2 that makes the opponent lose 1 life whenever he attacks. And then we also have 4 copies of Fatal Push for 1 mana as a cheap removal spell to get blockers out of the way. And then 3 copies of Supernatural Stamina, a nice combat trick giving our creature +2/+0, and if our creature would die, it returns to the battlefield tapped instead, so also re-triggers cards like Glint-Sleeve Siphoner, which we will get to in just a second. Then in the 2-drop slot we have some more powerful creatures. We have 4 copies of Scrapheap Scrounger, a nice recursive threat as a 2 mana 3/2 that can block, but for 2 mana we can exile another creature in our graveyard to return him from the graveyard into play, so can keep attacking. Then we also have 4 copies of Glint-Sleeve Siphoner, which is a great creature, 2 mana 2/1 with Menace. She gains 1 energy when she enters the battlefield or attacks, and at the beginning of our upkeep we can spend 2 energy and pay 1 life to draw a card. And we're not playing any Ether Hubs in our deck despite the Siphoner, just because we want all our lands to make black mana, and then if we would have to use the Ether Hub for black mana we would waste that energy anyways, so we're better off just playing Swamps and Ifnir Deadlands. Then we have some more removal in the form of Walk the Plank to take out larger creatures, and there's not too many Merfolk decks running around. Then we have 3 copies of Aethersphere Harvester as a nice vehicle. The crew cost is only 1, so we can crew it with any of our creatures, and it also gains 2 energy when it enters the battlefield, and we can pay energy to give the Harvester lifelink. So the Harvester works very well with our Night Market Lookout as a way to drain out the opponent without having to attack with the Lookout. And of course the energy also works nicely with our Glint-Sleeve Siphoner to draw extra cards when we don't need the life gain. Then we also have 2 copies of a Ruin Raider, a 3 mana 3/2 with Raid, and if we attacked with a creature during our turn, we get to reveal the top card of our library, put it into our hand, and lose life equal to the converted mana cost, which of course in this deck is going to be very low, so the Ruin Raider just helps us draw more cards and is not going to deal us too much damage. And last but not least, we have 3 copies of Bone Picker, which looks like a 4 mana 3/2 with Flying and Death Touch, but in our deck it's going to be a 1 mana 3/2 with Flying and Death Touch most of the time, since Bone Picker costs 3 generic mana less to cast if a creature died this turn. So we can combine Bone Picker with a removal spell like Fatal Push or Walk the Plank, or we can just attack with all our 1-drops, force the opponent to make some trades, and then still be able to play Bone Picker on the cheap. And Bone Picker also works nicely with our Supernatural Stamina, because the creature doesn't become indestructible, it returns from the graveyard into play, which means a creature died, and Bone Picker only costs 1 mana. And then taking a quick look at our mana base, we've got 15 Swamps and 4 Ifnir Deadlands, which we might be able to use in the late game to take out an opposing creature if we're flooding out a bit, and that's one of the strengths of the Monoblack Aggro deck. Only 19 lands, which means in an average game we're going to draw more spells than our opponents. Then quickly going over the sideboard, we have 4 copies of Duress alongside 3 copies of Kitesail Freebooter for some hand disruption against spell-heavy decks. Then we have 2 copies of 4th Bridge Prowler, which shines against 1 toughness creatures. We've got 2 copies of Moment of Craving as a cheap removal spell against the aggressive red decks. 2 more copies of Walk the Plank to take out larger creatures. And finally 2 copies of Ammit Eternal as a hard-hitting creature that we can bring in if our opponent relies too much on sweeper effects like Golden Demise to stop us. That way we have a threat that can survive the -2/-2 effect and still deal a lot of damage by himself. So that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the play, and this hand seems acceptable. 3 lands is a bit much, but we do get to curve 1-drops into some powerful 2-drops. I think we lead with the Lookout for now. The Lookout can't attack into, let's say, a 1/1 as well as the Conquistador would, but it does gain us life right away, so it's slightly better in that aspect. So let's attack for 1. And I think we played a Scrapheap just because it hits harder than the Siphoner here. Up against the blue-red. Alright, so let's attack for 5 and see what happens. Opponent takes it, and here I think we lead with the Conquistador. See if they want to counter this. And then I'll play another Scrapheap. Resolves. Our opponent better have a sweeper here. Arch over Aska is not going to do it. And a Foundry Inspector. Opponent some sort of artifact-based deck. Well, the Inspector does do a decent job of blocking our 1-drops, but it also enables Revolt for Fatal Push. And we essentially get in for 3 additional points of damage, thanks to the triggered abilities from the Conquistador and the Night Market Lookout. So if our opponent blocks one of our 1-drops, we can Fatal Push plus Siphoner. So nice curve out here. Could have also played nothing here and keep up the Scrapheap activation in case our opponent does have a sweeper, so we can return the Scrapheap end of turn and still have lethal. But this worked out. So up against what looks like a blue-red artifact-based deck. Not sure how many control elements we need to expect. Don't think we want to change too much before we see more of the opponent's deck. Ammit Eternal could be okay if our opponent relies on damage-based removal. So I assume we can bring in the Ammit. If our opponent's going to bring in some sweeper effects like Sweltering Suns, the Ammit could survive that. And then maybe Walk the Plank's not going to be great here. So I think we just try this, and then we can reconsider after we see more from the opponent's deck. Alright, we're on the draw here with a 1-lander. On the draw I think we can definitely keep a 1-lander. We have 2 1-drops and a trick. And if we draw land, we have the Scrapheaps, which are going to be pretty good. And there's a second swamp, nice. I think an ideal opening hand for this deck has 2 lands. So we can go 1-drop into double 1-drop. Double Spire Bluff. Into Servo Schematic, alright. So I guess our opponent could be some sort of improvised deck, which would make sense. Conquistador does attack nicely into the Servo token though, so that's nice. So let's attack for 1. I suppose we could have considered taking out some Fatal Pushes. And here we have to decide between Scrapheap and Conquistador. I think I'll go with the Scrapheap, just as a more mana efficient play, even though we don't get to keep up the stamina. And then next turn we might be casting the Ruin Raider after attacking. Aethersphere Harvester, that's certainly annoying. So we could just attack with the Scrapheap Scrounger and then use the stamina to take out the Harvester. Or we can just play our own Harvester and do nothing else. I think we want to keep applying pressure here. And try to take out the Harvester. If our opponent just takes it, we can play the Ruin Raider. So let's play the stamina. Opponent does get to gain 3 life if they want, but that's fine. And then we'll play another Scrapheap second main. Foundry Inspector makes artifacts cheaper and another Servo Schematic. Okay, Scrapheap still have decent attacks here. And yeah, let's just get in there with the Scrapheaps. I'm fine if the opponent wants to make some trades, and then we can play Ruin Raider afterwards. Opponent double blocks 1 and takes 3. Alright. Draw another Siphoner. So if we draw land next turn, we can go double Siphoner, and draw a card on our following upkeep. Opponent does gain one from the Aethersphere, so that's annoying. But we're gonna try and leverage our Ruin Raider to get up on cards and win the game that way. Just have to hope our opponent doesn't have a very powerful card left in hand. So if our opponent is on some sort of improvised deck, they seem to be just blue-red, so we don't need to fear the giant 5/5 flying demon in black. Opponent just says go, which is a little suspicious. I think we just attack with the Scrapheap. Don't really want to attack with the Ruin Raider here. Kind of like playing the Harvester here, just because that plays around a potential sweeper effect and gives us energy for when we play the Siphoner, we can draw cards right away. Alright, our opponent lets us go to end step, we find a swamp with the Ruin Raider, so next turn we could go double Siphoner if we want to. Opponent tapping a lot of mana for Metalwork Colossus. Okay. Well, we can chump that one for a couple turns, and we can fly over with the Harvester in the meantime. Another Harvester. Well, now that our opponent played the Colossus, playing a bunch of Harvesters is pretty appealing, but the Siphoners also have Menace, so that could still work. Our opponent has one card left in hand, so I don't think we need to fear a sweeper effect all that much. So I think the plan here is just to attack with the Harvester, and I guess we can crew with the Scrapheap since that can't block. And then we'll play two Siphoners, try to get up on cards. And I think I will use the lifelink mode here, since our life total could definitely matter. And we should still be able to draw a card with the Siphoners next turn. So play a Siphoner, and play another one, and then hope that our opponent doesn't have a sweeper effect here. Don't think playing the two 1-drops does much for us here. At least the Siphoners have Menace and can attack into Inspector plus Colossus. And we find a swamp with Ruin Raider. So we're drawing 3 cards a turn now with the Siphoner and the Ruin Raider. Opponent still has that Aethersphere that they can sacrifice if they want to. Maybe get another Colossus. Instead a Scrap Prowler. Okay. So if this dies, they get to return a artifact card from their graveyard with a lesser converted mana cost. So if they can sacrifice the servo schematic somehow, then they could get those back from the graveyard. But they can't get back the Harvester. Colossus attacks, so we're just gonna chump with the Conquistador, I think. Even though the Conquistador could get in for 1 point of damage in the future. And here on upkeep, we'll pay 2 energy to draw a card. If we didn't gain a life last turn, we could have drawn 2 cards here, but I think 1 is still fine. Alright, so a third Harvester and Swamp, so we can go double 1-drop Harvester, or we can get Scrapheap back, which can also crew the Harvester. So a few options. I think we just start by attacking with Scrounger, Siphoners, and Harvester. So that means we want to crew the Harvester right now. So do we get back the Scrapheap, or do we play 2 1-drops? I think we get back the Scrapheap here. And then crew. Could also attack with the Ruin Raider, but I think we keep the Ruin Raider in play for 1 more turn here. So we get some energy, up to 3 energy, so I think it's okay to use the lifelink mode on Harvester here, since we still get 2 energy left to draw a card, and we're likely going to play Harvester here anyways, which also gains us 2 more energy. Opponent goes for the double block. I'll kill the Prowler here, which is scarier. Apparently we missed our window to give the Harvester lifelink there, but I don't think it's going to matter too much. We'll play another Harvester, say go, and we can crew the second Harvester with the Ruin Raider to block the Inspector. Opponent's going to sacrifice the Aethersphere. They find Sorcerer's Spyglass. Well, that can prevent us from crewing the Harvesters, so that's actually pretty annoying here. Opponent drew a card for the turn, and they have a Spyglass in hand. Island is their draw step, so they'll play Spyglass on Harvester. They're even going to see the other one we have in hand, so that's a pretty easy choice. So we'll have to win this game on the ground with our other creatures here. We can also use the Ifnir Deadlands next turn to take out the Inspector. which I guess is enough to win the game here. So we can draw a card with the Siphoner, find an Ammit Eternal, and yeah, we can just kill the Inspector. Opponent's got 1 blocker to our 4 attackers, and they can only prevent 3 damage. And they can't use the Metalwork Colossus ability when he's in play, so they can't sacrifice the servo schematics here. If they had a Colossus in the graveyard, things would be trickier, since then they can make servos at instant speed by sacrificing the schematics. And we got the GGs from our opponents. And that's gonna do it. Awesome. So we managed to beat blue-red artifacts. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. And 4 lands is a lot for this deck. Ideally you want only 2 lands in your opener. But we do have this Ruined Raider, which makes having 3 lands acceptable. Think we keep, and then hope to not draw any more lands for the rest of the game. Opponent on plains. Alright, I think we played a Conquistador. And there's a treasure map. It's actually pretty tricky what 1-drop to play there, since Scoundrel attacks better into a 2/2 creature, while the Conquistador attacks better into a 1/1 creature. And I'm not sure what to expect out of plains. I'm sure there's a correct answer there to what creature we should play on turn 1. And that's one of the skills in mastering the mono-black deck. Mono-white deck so far with treasure map. So it looks to be a more controlling deck. And Oraskar Relic as well. Opponent pretty serious about ramping, getting up to 10 permanents. And they can use the Relic to scry with treasure map, that's neat. So we're just going to try and apply as much pressure as possible, hope to dodge a Fumigate. Can't really play around Fumigate all that well. Yeah, let's attack for 4 and then play Ruined Raider. Try to keep the cards flowing. So far we haven't drawn any lands, which is good. So let's play Ruined Raider, hope to dodge Fumigate or Saddle Wreckage for a couple turns here. Opponent scries on upkeep, so no Fumigate incoming, could still be a Saddle Wreckage. Opponent with an Ixalan's Binding, presumably on Ruined Raider. Nope, they go for the Siphoner, which, as it turns out, we had another Siphoner in hand. So that's unfortunate. And of course no enchantment hate in mono black. Well, Harvester is nice since that plays around a potential Fumigate better. So we can attack for 5 and then play a Dread Wanderer plus Harvester. And draw a card from Ruined Raider, another Siphoner. Wow, this Ixalan's Binding is doing a lot of work for the opponent, and they don't even know it. So their opponent's got quite a bit of mana available now. They can also sacrifice the Oraskar Relic next turn. Baffling End on the Ruined Raider, and they have 1 card left. So let's hope that card is not some sort of mass removal spell. And there we also wanted to play the Wanderer over a Scoundrel, since Scoundrel can crew the Harvester, while the Wanderer comes into play tapped. Opponent with Thaumatic Compass, but they only have 6 lands at the moment, so it's not going to transform quite yet. And a Night Market Lookout is also a nice one at crewing the Harvester here. So we can tap that to crew the Harvester. Drain the opponent for 1. We can just play our creatures pre-combat here. Attack with everyone. And we might as well use the lifelink since we're not going to get to draw cards with the Siphoner anyways. This puts the opponent to 1, and then we can just hardcast the Bone Picker next turn to crew the Harvester to finish them off. Should they have a sweeper effect, although I guess a Fumigate here would gain them a bit of life back. So you could have also made the argument for not playing the Scoundrel to play around a Fumigate. Opponent cycles Cast Out. Sacrifices a treasure with Treasure Cove. Don't even have to attack into a Saddle Wreckage since we can just tap the Night Market Lookout with the Harvester to kill our opponent. So it's gotta be exactly Fumigate, I think, here. And with this Ixalan's Binding on Glint-Sleeve Siphoner, we can't even empty our hand for Dread Wanderer purposes. Yeah, I think we should have kept the Scoundrel in hand here just to play around Fumigate better. Opponent gets the Plains. Thopter Arrest is not gonna do it, but I appreciate our opponent showing us more cards. And alright, on to sideboarding against a mono-white sort of controlling deck, so Duresses and Kitesail Freebooters easily come in. And then we want to take out Fatal Push and Walk the Plank, which doesn't do much here. Could also make an argument for Ammit Eternal. And perhaps the Bone Picker's not going to be great here, as our opponent just exiles all our stuff at sorcery speed. So Bone Picker's going to cost 4 all the time. The Supernatural Stamina is also not going to be great in this matchup, so let's see if we maybe have a better replacement. Not really. Don't think the Prowler's going to do much, and this at least can be used as a pump spell to get into more damage. And against Fumigate, this can save a creature, so I think we try it like this. And this hand seems pretty decent. We've got a Duress to take a look, and then look out to crew the Harvester, and a Ruin Raider as well. So, very interesting decision here on turn 1. Do we play the 1-drop or the Duress? I think if the plan is to play the Siphoner into either Harvester or Raider, I would rather play the Duress to make sure that these survive if possible. And the Lookout doesn't really fit into that plan all that well, since then we have to Duress on turn 2 and miss out on playing the Siphoner. So I think we Duress on turn 1 here. Usually it pays off to wait a couple turns on your Duress, but given our hand and the lack of more 1-drops, I think it makes sense to play the Duress here. And our opponent's hand is a bunch of lands, Fumigate and Treasure Map. So we can kind of play around Fumigate in a way here, since we have all these card advantage engines. And by taking away Treasure Map, we take away our opponent's card selection. So I think I'm actually okay taking the Treasure Map. We also have some draw steps to find another Duress or Kitesail Freebooter to take away the Fumigate. So yeah, I'll take the Treasure Map. It's a dangerous play, but I think we can play around Fumigate with our hand. We've got the Harvester, which doesn't die to it, and then the Siphoner and Ruin Raider, which draws extra cards. Opponent with Plains go. Let's play the Siphoner over the 2 1-drops. I think that makes sense given the Fumigate. Play Siphoner, say go. There's Scavenger Grounds number 1. And alright, our opponent picked up a Baffling End, unfortunately. Let's see, we can go double 1-drop, or we can go Harvester. I like Harvester here, since again plays around Fumigate nicely, and then next turn we can go Ruin Raider, crew the Harvester attack, and still get a raid trigger. And hope our opponent doesn't have a Thopter Arrest here. Another Scavenger Grounds. Alright, so we could also crew with the Night Market Lookout here, but our opponent's gonna have Fumigate next turn. I think it makes more sense to play the Ruin Raider, crew the Harvester attack, and not play anything else. Force them to just 1-for-1 with the Ruin Raider with the Fumigate if they wanna get rid of it. So let's play Ruin Raider. Crew, and then hope they don't have a Settled Wreckage here just for the Harvester. And I'm not going to give it lifelink since we have more Siphoners we can draw into here. And I'm not going to play the 1-drop since I don't want to give them the 2-for-1 with Fumigate. Alright, Supernatural Stamina. So if they do Fumigate, we actually have a nice answer here. Opponent actually played a Plains there, so they still have Scavenger Grounds Fumigate in hand. So I think here we just attack with the Ruin Raider to play around Settled Wreckage. But given the stamina, maybe that changes things. So let's say our opponent does have the Settled Wreckage. Then we can just attack with the Harvester, they settle us, we still get to draw a card from Ruin Raider end of turn, and then we get to save Ruin Raider from the Fumigate, and then we're just going to be up so many cards over the opponent. While if we attack with Ruin Raider and they settle, then we don't get to draw the card end of turn, and we definitely don't attack with both if we're trying to play around Settled Wreckage. So yeah, let's crew with Ruin Raider and get in there. So let's see if they have the Settle. They don't, or they don't want to use it. And I think we could also just play the Night Market Lookout here, since that can still crew the Harvester, drain the opponent for 1, and that might entice the opponent into playing the Fumigate, which we actually want them to. Draw a card from Ruin Raider, another Stamina. Opponent does get to see it, so that's the bad news, but we did play another creature here, so what's the opponent gonna do? Not play anything. So we've got 2 Staminas in hand. Shafadjun, so our opponent still has a Scavenger Grounds in hand. Opponent does go for the Fumigate. If we wanted to crew the Harvester, we should have done it in our turn, I suppose. But we also kind of wanted to bait them into using the Fumigate here. So Stamina resolves. Ruin Raider comes back. Opponent might just have a second Fumigate in hand. So now we can play the Scoundrel attack for 6. So had we crewed the Harvester in our turn with the Night Market Lookout, our opponent would have been at 15 here, dropping to 9. Hopefully it's not gonna matter. So let's keep playing out our lands. And say go. Draw a card from Ruin Raider. Find another Scoundrel. Opponent still with the Scavenger Grounds in hand. And there's a treasure map. So 1 unknown card in hand. And doesn't look like it's Fumigate. Opponent says go. Another Harvester is excellent here. I think we just attack with Harvester and Scoundrel to play around Cellar Wreckage. We could crew the Harvester by playing the new Scoundrel, but might as well crew with the Ruin Raider. So we wouldn't really mind the Cellar Wreckage here, but our opponent doesn't have it. They drop to 5, and now the second Harvester should be game. As now we have 2 threats that survive a sweeper effect, and we still have the stamina to protect our Ruin Raider, and now the Freebooter as well can take a look at the opponent's hand in case they do have the Cellar Wreckage, so they can't even fog us. Approach, well, didn't expect the approach here, but I guess they gain 7, so I guess if they just have another approach in hand or top deck one, we could be dead. So we have 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 with the stamina, so we can just double check with the Freebooter here that they don't have anything. Opponent scries, they're tapped out, and we can just use stamina as a combo trick here. Let's see what the opponent has in hand, just the plains. Alright, so let's play another 1-drop to crew the Harvester with. Crew Harvester number 1. Crew Harvester number 2, and then attack with everyone, and then use stamina for the win. And that does it. Awesome, managed to beat Mono White Approach. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, and this hand's not particularly great. We've got some of these conditional cards like Bone Picker and Stamina, so we can't quite know how good this hand is, but we do get to go look out into maybe a Walk the Plank, or ideally Stamina plus Bone Picker. So I think I'll keep, but it's borderline. As far as 3 land 4 spells hand go, this is certainly one of the lower percentage hands. Alright, Conquistador I think makes that a little bit better. Against a green deck, they could just play a random 2-mana 2/2 ramp creature, so I guess we want to play the Lookout, since that gets in for an extra points of life gain for us, and then we can still go Stamina plus Bone Picker. Branchwalker gets a counter, revealing Vraska's Contempt, and they put it in the graveyard, so either they're looking for lands or they just don't need it, or they think it's just too slow in the matchup, which could be the case. So here, pretty clear, we attack, use Stamina, and then go Bone Picker. The other option would have been not to attack and then just playing 2 more 1-drops, and then either going Walk the Plank, Bone Picker next turn, or Stamina plus Bone Picker. But I like clearing the Branchwalker now, and getting this evasive Bone Picker in play, which they can't easily Fatal Push, so they need something like Vraska's Contempt. And doing this play now while the opponent doesn't have any mana up to maybe respond to the Stamina is also a lot safer. And if they play another blocker, we could go Walk the Plank plus 1-drop now. And there's Winding Constrictor, which we can Walk the Plank. So hopefully if they don't have the Blossoming Defense to protect the Constrictor. They don't. Attack for a bunch. And I think I play another Lookout here over the Conquistador. Don't think the 1 toughness matters. And again, we gain an extra life with a Lookout compared to the Conquistador. I suppose a reason to play the Conquistador is if our opponent's playing Seeker Squire and reveals a land from Explorer. We can attack with a 1-2 into an opposing 1-2 while we can't attack with Night Market Lookouts, but you don't typically see Seeker Squire in the black-green decks. Alright, another Conquistador. So here, I think we just attack with the Bone Picker, and then just play all our 1-drops and maybe attack with everyone next turn. Right now we would only be getting in for 3 damage by sacrificing a Night Market Lookout, which I think we can do better if we wait 1 turn. Now if our opponent just plays 2 creatures next turn, then that's not going to be true. This also buys us time, as the opponent can't really attack us back when we can attack them back for 8. So hopefully they can't play any more creatures here. Instead, Winding Constrictor. Anything else? They're out of black mana, which could have also played a role in their decision to put the Vraska's Contempt in their graveyard. And here we have a funny interaction as well. Winding Constrictor interacting with Ifnir Deadlands. If we put 2 -1/-1 counters, if the opponent has a Winding Constrictor, we get to put 3 -1/-1 counters on the opponent's permanents. So we could kill the Rishkar or the Constrictor. As it turns out, we didn't find a land for the Deadlands, so we're just attacking with the Bone Picker for now, I think. If we attack with everyone, our opponent would kill 2 of our creatures and then take a total of 6 extra damage. So it's probably worth it to attack with everyone. Opponent's on only green mana, so they can't really have any relevant interaction here. And then we can still add the Dread Wanderer as another attacker. Still would have been nice to be able to use the Ifnir Deadlands here. And I guess one of the nightmare scenarios is our opponent playing a giant Walking Ballista next turn. So I'm actually surprised our opponent decided to block the Lookouts compared to the Conquistadors, since a Walking Ballista can easily kill the Lookout, but requires 2 counters to kill the Conquistador. And of course every point of damage matters here. So let's see if our opponent can stabilize. Nope, they cannot, so we're up against a green-black counters deck. So this is where we want the 2 extra copies of Walk the Plank. That's pretty much it. You could also make an argument for the Ammit Eternal. I don't think we want the Ammit Eternal here. I like pretty much all our cards. Perhaps we can take out some of our 1-drops here, like this Grasping Scoundrel. This seems okay. I suppose a Grasping Scoundrel can attack into a Servant of the Conduit, while the Night Market Lookout and Vicious Conquistador cannot. But the advantage of the Lookout and the Conquistador is that they can still deal damage, even if the opponent can block them. This hand is a clear mulligan, and this one I guess we can keep, and we'll keep the land on top. So the plan here is just to play some 1-drops and then Walk the Plank, or Fatal Push all of the opponent's creatures. Opponent might also have their own copy of Fatal Push, so I'm gonna lead with the Conquistador, as it's the least valuable creature, given all the removal spells that can kill any potential blocker. Opponent does not have the Fatal Push or elects not to use it. And then Ifnir Deadlands, so if they play a 2-drop we can go Lookout plus Fatal Push. Also a reason to play Conquistador before Lookout is in case they have a Walking Ballista for 1, which could kill the Lookout but cannot kill the Conquistador. Merfolk Branchwalker reveals, hopefully reveals a non-land card, since we're planning to Fatal Push anyways. Reveals a forest instead, so our opponent does get a nice 2-for-1 here if we Fatal Push the Branchwalker. Could also Stamina, but I think I would rather Fatal Push than Stamina. Play the Lookouts, attack for 2. And then next turn we can choose between Walk the Plank or perhaps Supernatural Stamina. So we're hoping our opponent just plays creatures and doesn't remove our creatures, since we're pretty heavy on the removal and don't really have other threats in hand. Another Branchwalker reveals Sky Sovereign, alright. So gotta kill our opponent before they get to resolve their 5-drop, which is gonna be tricky. Conquistador is a nice draw here. So now we have to consider a Fatal Push from the opponent. So if we go for the stamina and they fatal push in response, that would be kind of a disaster. But if we walk the plank, then we cannot also play the Conquistador. Our opponent did not fatal push on turn 1, which leads me to believe they might not have the fatal push, but that's a risky assumption. And we do know about the Sky Sovereign that's on top of the opponent's deck, so we might have to play the slightly riskier line here, where we do get kind of blown out by the fatal push, but we might not be able to beat a fatal push anyways if our opponent gets to Sky Sovereign. So let's see how this goes. Opponent blocks. Let's see if they have the fatal push. Doesn't look like it. Alright, get the Lookout back. And we get to add a Conquistador to the board. So now we might be in a position where we can potentially outrace our opponents before they get their Sky Sovereign down and do too much damage. But they do have land number 4. And the Winding Constrictor into a Walking Ballista. That's pretty good here. So let's say 2-2 Walking Ballista. They're going to shoot down the Night Market Lookout right away. And Ifnir Deadlands doesn't quite do it here. Well, I guess we are killing the Constrictor here, so we can still make some attacks. But this is not the spot where we want to be. So next turn our opponent could go land Sky Sovereign, kill a Conquistador, and they're still at 11. So this game's pretty much over. Yep. And an aggressive attack from the Ballista. Opponent feeling pretty confident. I guess they're not planning on blocking with the Ballista, so they might as well. I guess our only hope is that our opponent doesn't have any creatures to crew the Sky Sovereign. And then we can walk the plank plus Bone Picker. They can shoot us for 1. And then we'll play the Bone Picker, which is probably gonna get picked off by the Sky Sovereign, is my guess. But I mean, it is crew 3, so it's not unreasonable for the opponent to be unable to crew the Sky Sovereign. But they do have 2 cards in hand now. So 2 creatures would do it. And this looks like a very big creature. A giant Walking Ballista for 3. Alright, that's gonna do it for me. So we saw Walking Ballista, we saw Sky Sovereign. Does that change anything? Sky Sovereign is a problem, but I don't think we can afford to bring in Freebooter or Duress to deal with it. So we just have to try and be faster now that we're on the play. Ballista is certainly pretty annoying, but I don't think we want to change anything. We already took out one of our 1 toughness creatures. We could consider Ammit Eternal now that we're on the play. I guess we can take out another 1 toughness creature here. And add our Ammit. And try it like this. And we're on the play with a pretty bad hand. 2 1-drops into an Ammit. It's not exactly what we're looking for. No removal, 4 lands is a bit much. I mean, this hand could win if our opponent keeps a very slow draw, but that's very unlikely. I think we have to go to 6 here. Alright, this is, I guess, a bit better. We're missing the 1-drop creature, but we do have Siphoner into Harvester, so we can play a grindier game if the Siphoner survives. And I don't think we want a 3rd land, just because if the Siphoner dies and we play Harvester, then we still don't have any creatures to crew it with. So we really need to find more creatures, essentially. Blooming Marsh and nothing. Alright, there's a Dread Wanderer. So opponent can easily have Fatal Push, but I think we still have to curve out here. Play the Siphoner. Next turn we can go Wanderer. Keep up stamina. There's a Fatal Push. Is this the turn 1 Fatal Push, turn 2 Constrictor draw into Ballista? Nope, they have their own Siphoner. And we have a Walk the Plank. I'm not a fan of Walk the Plank on Siphoner here, just because we need to progress our own board. But the only other play is just Dread Wanderer, which isn't amazing. If we draw land next turn, we could go Walk the Plank plus Bone Picker if we're patient. So I guess that's the tiebreaker. This doesn't strike me as a particularly great matchup for the mono-black deck, just because the opponent has a nice mix of removal and large creatures to block with, and then especially Walking Ballista is kind of a nightmare for the deck when combined with Constrictor. Opponent just keeps up 3 mana, did not find the land, so let's attack, see what happens. If they just have another Fatal Push or some other removal spell, playing the Siphoner wouldn't be that great for us, so I think we just have to walk the plank. Don't get the value from Bone Picker, but we might still be able to play Bone Picker for 1 if the opponent kills our creature. Opponent did nothing end of turn, so they might not be too concerned about the Dread Wanderer. And there's Winding Constrictor. Into Walking Ballista, yep. So we can attack. Opponent just blocks. We play a Bone Picker for 1 and a Siphoner. Opponent can add 2 counters, have a 4-power Ballista, can just shoot down all our creatures. So that's not great. So I guess it plays either Siphoner, keep up stamina, but the Ballista can just shoot down the Siphoner twice. Or we can just play the Harvester, which at least can stay in play. And then we have to hope to top deck multiple removal spells. Ballista shoots down the Wanderer. That way we couldn't screw the Harvester in the opponent's turn. And they're just gonna pump the Ballista for now. So we do need to find a Fatal Push or walk the plank right now to still have a chance. That's not one of those. Guess we can attack for 3 lifelink with the Harvester. And if the opponent's a bit impatient, we could perhaps also play the Bone Picker if they kill the Siphoner right away. And our opponent is being patient, so I think we just have to say go. Not gonna play out Lookout since we can still use that to crew the Harvester for a turn. So our opponent's gonna attack first and then use the counter from the Ballista to get in for more damage, which is the correct play. And there's a Sky Sovereign once again. Can just kill the Siphoner if we stamina in response. Opponent's forced to use the Ballista, I suppose. Is there a point in using the stamina here? I don't think so. We would be, I guess, saving a damage from the Ballista. But maybe we can still get a use out of the stamina combined with the Harvester. Alright, found another Harvester. So we can play the Lookout, crew the Harvester, attack for essentially 4 if you combine the Lookout's Drain, and our opponent can attack us back for 8, and then shoot us down for another 5, so we would be dead, so we have to use the lifelink mode, that's for sure. And yeah, I think that's our only play here. Cannot really play defense, since the opponent can just shoot down the Lookout end of turn with the Ballista otherwise. Gain some life back. Could have used the stamina there just as a pump spell, but I don't think that wins us the game either. So we'll just say go and hope that something weird happens. Haship Oasis is also pretty good here. Opponent crews the Sky Sovereign. They can kill the Lookout with the Sky Sovereign trigger. We can respond with stamina, but that doesn't do anything against the Walking Ballista. And our opponent being able to kill our creatures in their turn also means we were never able to play Bone Picker on the cheap. Untap, and there's a Fatal Push. A few turns too late, I'm afraid. The problem here is that our opponent has this Haship Oasis, which they can use to pump the Constrictor and still be able to crew the Sky Sovereign. And it's also pretty likely that the opponent has another Fatal Push in hand, which would enable Revolt if we Fatal Push the Walking Ballista here. And we have to Fatal Push before we can play the Bone Picker, before we can crew the Harvester. So alright, let's cast Fatal Push on Walking Ballista. That's step 1. Opponent can pump it and shoot us for 5, putting us to 2. So Walking Ballista down. Now we can play the Bone Picker, which has to crew the Harvester here, since if we keep it on defense, nothing good is gonna happen. If we attack with the Harvester, opponent can have Fatal Push, which kills the Harvester, and then we're pretty much dead. So we have to hope our opponent somehow doesn't have Fatal Push, which means we attack with Harvester, can use Stamina just as a +2 pump spell, gain 5 life, go back up to 7. That way, if our opponent goes Hashep Oasis on Constrictor, crew Sky Sovereign, we're not dead. The other option would be to stay on defense, but then we're just giving the opponent more time to draw their powerful spells, so I don't think that works out. So let's crew. And we're forced to play the Stamina into a potential Fatal Push here, otherwise we're just dead on board. Give it lifelink and see what happens. Alright, we're at 7, opponent's at 6. So let's see if they kill us here or if we get to untap. There's Rishkar, so that should do it here, since now they can crew the Sky Sovereign and attack with the Constrictor. And we couldn't really bluff a Fatal Push, since if we had Fatal Push we would have used it many turns ago. And by using the first Fatal Push, our opponent knows that's our draw step. So I don't think a line where we don't use a Stamina and bluff Fatal Push in response to the Hashep Oasis activation works out. So we do die here, but still put up a fight against what is probably not a great matchup. Alright, I want to thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this gameplay, and as always, have a nice day. I also want to thank all my patrons for supporting the channel, and you can do so yourself as well over at patreon.com/LegenVD, where you get cool rewards for supporting the channel, as well as getting us closer to our goals, where with every goal reached we will release an additional weekly series. So if you want to see more content, Patreon is the place to go.